So, hello everyone. Welcome to our usual Nexus Seminar. Today we will have the pleasure to have the speaker with us. It's Bárbara Willaarts, and she is an environmental scientist working in the Water Security Research Group from the International Institute for Applied System Analysis, shortly IIASA. And she's a senior researcher at the ICATALIST. She has over 16 years of professional experience, and her research covers a broad range of topics relevant to the Nexus and to the governance and sustainability transition. It also benefits from an international research through different geographical settings that are ranging between Europe up to Latin America, and more recently also Africa and Asia. Her work has driven, her main work was really driven by this principle of sustainability and nexus. So I think we will enjoy today the talk, and I'm looking forward to hearing for the speech. Meanwhile, we just want to address my greetings and the greetings of Samanti Silva. She's on the train, unfortunately, so she cannot speak. I will give the greetings, and also I wish you a lovely time ahead during this speech. And Bárbara, thank you again for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Irina, and good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be sharing some of my learnings during this almost past decade working on the Nexus. And I'm very glad to be here today, and I thank Juno Flores, Prisma, and University of Dresden Technical University for giving me the opportunity to be here with you. I would like to share my insights, but I am also really willing to exchange with you and to learn also from your experiences. So allowed me to start maybe, sharing some of my experiences, and then I think we will have enough time for Q&A. I believe, yes, I can share the screen. So allowed me maybe... Serena or someone, can you confirm that you can see my screen, sharing screen?
Yes, but not on a full screen yet.
Not?
Now we do.
Okay, good. Okay, so the topic of today, it's about Nexus. I mean, this is probably one of the main topics that drives the interest in these seminars. And I would like to share some experiences working on doing Nexus research, but with a particular focus. And is that focus on trying to make science serve a social purpose that goes beyond achieving scientific excellence, which is, of course, a very important factor, but also trying to make science and the science around the Nexus a bit more impactful, not just for policy. I mean, I know the title of the presentation is Policy, Science Policy Gap, but I would like to also actually add the dimension of society, which is so important as well. So briefly, an outline of my presentation. I would like to make a bit the case on why this gap exists. Also, how science, and particularly a branch of science, which is transdisciplinary science, can actually address this gap, and then give some practical experiences of doing this kind of transdisciplinary projects at different scales, transboundary, local, and regional. Okay, so if we start from the beginning, I mean, we can speak that there is a science policy society gap when we talk about the Nexus, but I think this is broadly, and it actually covers many relevant societal aspects, and particularly when it comes to sustainability challenges. No, we do have massive challenges ahead of us, and one bigger than the other. and things do not seem to go in the right direction. So definitely this is making the case for at least us as a scientific community to make ourselves the question, I mean, how can we actually do better to help contributing to address these different challenges? One aspect that it's a common characteristic across globally, I mean, generally sustainability challenges, is that these are very complex problems. So it's actually very difficult that one single knowledge domain has actually the full picture of the system and understands what the problems are and what the solutions are. And this is very closely related with one very frequent aspect that we have when we deal with sustainability challenges, which is the ambiguity. All of us probably, when we talk about the nexus, we have within that broad field some expertise on certain type of nexus, or maybe certain type of methods, or maybe certain type of regions, etc. But I think it is very important to acknowledge that, you know, these systems are extremely complex, and depending what is your field of expertise and your understanding, this has a lot of influence because it also affects the way you frame the problem. So it's not just that you realize that you don't have a good understanding about the entire system, it's actually that your perception about what the problems are might be also different or biased with respect to the perceptions of others. So I think it is important to work and to recognize and work with the existence of this ambiguity. Another very common feature of sustainability challenges that I don't think this is new to anyone is the uncertainty. I mean, I don't think that I need to explain right now what this means, because everyone is living uncertain times every day. So even at the time of designing an action plan to address a very specific nexus challenges somewhere, the problem that we encounter is that the circumstances and the system boundaries and the system as it is right now might be actually changing in the short term. So our plan might be not necessarily suitable to address these challenges under changing conditions. All this complexity actually brings down to a more concrete aspect or problem that we face. So we are, you know, these days living in all this complexity and sometimes very overwhelming with the amount of problems and the incapacity that, you know, we feel as scientists or as society, as members of the society, or probably as well policymakers in their attempt to address some of these issues. But there is a reality as well, is that there is a gap between what academia can do, the knowledge that academia has, the knowledge that policy has, and the level of awareness and the level of involvement that society needs to bring into the resolution or being able to address these challenges. So when you look at why do we have this gap, there is multiple factors, and I'm just here highlighting very few, but I will make a few stronger points in the next PowerPoint, in the next slides. So of course we have, I mean, as communities, scientists and policymakers, we have different goals. We actually also have different, I mean, we are driven by different goals, and then therefore also different roles and activities. We also search for different things. I mean, scientists, we try to use a rational model and seek for the truth, whereas policymakers, for instance, they are more prone to find compromises, more using an intuitive model. And then we also speak different languages. And I mean, I think here I would like to make the point that it's not, I mean, which is obviously the case, different cultures, you know, speak different languages, but even speaking the same language, we sometimes do not understand each other. And I think that we as scientists, we are quite used to, in our environments, when we try to explain, you know, what we do or the complexity that we are researching, that people sometimes are looking at us like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I think this is not just a problem from our community. I think policymakers, they also use their own jargon and their own language. And sometimes it's really difficult to know what are they talking about. And another aspect which I think it matters, and especially to understand a bit where part of this gap is the time scale. I mean, policymakers, as we all know, they need answers for yesterday, and they don't like to work with uncertainty. They like to have certainty on their decisions. And this is not how science is being done, nor in terms of the time scale, but also in terms of managing this uncertainty, because we still have, when we do our research, a lot of uncertainty. But I would like to speak for three aspects that I think it make the call for what I've called at the beginning this transdisciplinary approach. So one is that, and I feel, I mean, I don't feel empowered to talk about what policymakers do wrong, because I'm not a policymaker, I'm a researcher. So I feel a bit more empowered, or I have a bit more experience in seeing what works and what doesn't within our scientific community to maintain this gap, no, or not making enough effort from our side to bridge this gap with science and polity. First of all, it's science as an institution. I think the incentives that we have to actually do science that goes beyond, you know, publishing our papers or doing our fundraising, you know, to make sure that our institutions keep going and, you know, our projects and so on. There is little incentive or little capacity actually to do a research which is more demand driven. So I think that science, I mean, the sets of incentives and science as an institution does have very little, provide so far very little incentives to go into more this kind of a transdisciplinary science. Also, funding schemes are not perfectly designed for that. So there is an institutional problem there. But there is other issues. And I think that maybe some of you can recognize this and think that, you know, you are somehow familiarized with the way in which science has been done for a long time, a bit more kind of top down, like science having a bit the knowledge supremacy, and we go back to our labs, we cook a bit the questions that we need to address, and then we come back with these very complex solutions, and then, you know, whoever it's our target audience look at us saying, oh, this is great, but I don't understand a single thing, or this is not really the problem that I need to be addressing, or that it's more urgent. So I think this also requires rethinking a little bit the way we design and implement our research projects. And last but not least, and I think this is more along the lines of scientific innovation in terms of methods, you know, to connect better with science and society. I mean, I think that for a long time, the way of learning and from our side to communicate and try to influence decision making has been very much based on methods, you know, which are very anchored in rational approaches, no? And this is the basis of science and the basis of using models to provide facts, etc. No, but I think that we need to understand, and this is increasingly, I think we are witnessing like a lot of innovation in this sense. There is other ways in which we can reach society, and where we can try to bring scientific knowledge into our societies and our policy making space. And there is these other methods which are based more on the experiential part of seeing, and this is all these bridging areas where we have now science and arts, you know, being combined in order to communicate from a more artistic point of view what science is. And the results, of course, of science. And then there is another important branch of science, which is more based on what it's called doing first. And this is the whole space of areas like the serious games or simulation games, where we are not only going with our models to stakeholders and say, listen, this is the results of our models, but we are actually developing some of these models with them, and we are actually allowing the stakeholders to use these models, no, in more or less simplified format. But this is a much more participatory way of doing the science. So as a mean to bridge this gap, and on the basis of what I've indicated, I think from science there are different ways in which we can try to bridge this gap, and this is why, you know, symbolically I put this bridge in the back of this slide. Because there is a lot, I mean, this is not just happening, or this bridge is not only going to happen just because we want it as scientists. I mean, there needs to be also a willingness, not from the other side, but we nevertheless, as scientists, we have the obligation, or I feel at least that I have the responsibility, if I'm concerned about this, to build these bridges, no? So this is the space, and this is what I wanted to make the case. This is the space where transdisciplinary science and it comes very strongly and actually has a lot of potential to help bridging some of these gaps. I'm not saying that this is the only way forward. I'm just claiming that this is, for myself, from my experience, this has been, and it's proven to be a very good way of bridging this gap. Okay, let me see. I cannot pass the. Okay. So what is transdisciplinary research? I guess you are mostly familiar with this idea. I mean, I'm not going to go back to the scientific debate about what transdisciplinary research is. I want to stay a bit more practical, because I think if there is an innovation or something which makes transdisciplinary research different from other science domains, is that other than the scientific impact, which nobody denies that, this branch of science really wants to transcend this aspect and really aims to increase the social impact of research. So what are the key characteristics? Co-production. So it's no longer about the knowledge provided by science. I mean, as when I was showing you this slide on the ambiguity, I think that we need to realize and understand that we scientists, we also do not understand as well, I mean, the boundary conditions in which decision makers operate, or many other practical knowledge and cultural knowledge which we are not, I mean, we don't have. And I think all this, the integration of this different type of knowledge is actually necessary to expand our own worldviews, but more importantly also to come up with practical options and solutions. No, I think it's also quite an important characteristic of this transdisciplinary research that is normally applied in contexts where, yeah, as I was showing at the beginning, where there is some system thinking needed, no, and where we need to embrace and address this complexity. And this speaks perfectly for the Nexus. Another aspect, and this is what I was just saying as well, is that the need to innovate with the way we do the science. Combining different kind of approaches, and I know that this is easier said than done, and anyone that is trying to do this, it is quite challenging, but I think this is a frontier that we need to address. Transformative change is not necessarily that every transdisciplinary research is forward-looking and future-building, but I think it is increasingly the case when we deal with sustainability, since these are not issues or topics that are going to be resolved in one go and one day, that it's also important to have like a long, medium-term perspective with a clear vision, and also a clear understanding on which actors should be part of it and transition under these highly uncertainties. And very important that it's action-oriented, and that is what makes it also socially relevant. Okay, so after this kind of a bit of a background about why do we have this gap and maybe in which way science can help addressing this, I would like to reflect and present you a number of examples of projects, because sometimes through examples things become clearer. And I'm sure many of you have also very nice examples, so I'm very happy also to learn from you. So I will give one example, which is a project that it's not new. I mean, it was finished already in 2020. But I found this project, this was one of the projects where I was trying to, for the very first time, combining this Nexus approach with this transdisciplinary approach as well. And it was quite impactful. And I have to say, other than any scientific approach that we took or any any credit that the team of scientists that we have, I think also the institutional setup of this project was very suitable, because this was not this project was not funded by a purely research academic funding scheme. This was funded by the Global Environment Facility. So they basically do, if they fund projects like this, is because they want research that is action oriented. So they are really interested in the social outcomes of this project. So we had this setting that allowed us to prioritize maybe some sort of social impact over having too many publications or many publications. Did not exclude it, but there was another priority. So I want to stress that, because I think it is very important as well that the institutional setup, it's somehow has an enabling environment. Okay, so very, very briefly, without going into the details. So this project, one of the basins that we were working was the Zambezi Basin. The Zambezi Basin is located in Southern Africa. There is 8 riparian countries, and there is huge, massive environmental and socioeconomic challenges, and accordingly, there is, of course, the interest, the need, and the capacity within the different governments to start developing multiple sectoral plans to improve food security, to increase energy security, to, using their own wordings, also to maximize the use and the benefits of water, etc. So all these plans are happening at the country level, but this is, of course, a shared transboundary basin. So that means that whatever is happening upstream is going to happen, is going to impact very likely downstream. No, so we came in this at the time we were doing this project, the so to say the water authority, which is not an authority, it's the River Basin Organization, which facilitates the dialogue between the different countries. They were concerned about, they were developing the strategic development plan, and they wanted to provide some advice to countries, for them to understand what could be the implications of sectoral policies, and also at the space of Nexus in the different countries. So some of the big questions were how to align different sectoral plans and the water demands, taking a water lens approach, how to reconcile upstream and downstream development plans and interests. And also, very importantly, how is climate change expected to affect the sectoral and country development plans? Because many of these plans, and then this is not unique from the SMBC, this is somehow also in the mindsets still in many parts of the world, that we still think that the solutions that allowed certain countries to are where they are today is the same kind of solutions and the same kind of pathways that developing countries can take. And the reality is that no, we are in a different world, and probably climate change and other global drivers will require different way of reaching our objectives. So this was just a summary of the main stakeholders. This was, and I want to make the case because then I have an opposite example. This was a high-level dialogue in the sense that the stakeholders here were not from the local community up to the ministry. This was a dialogue at the ministry level, and then development banks and international organizations. And it was facilitated, it was convened by SAMCOM, which is the Zambezi Watercourse Commission. So here is where the scientific part enters when it comes to the approach that we took. So we were basically tasked, or we agreed in these conversations with the SMBC Watercourse Commission, that what we could do is to develop a participatory scenario building exercise using our modeling capabilities, but actually acknowledging and taking into account what are the development priorities and preferences from these different countries. So it had a very strong technical component, developing and integrating all these models, to have a integrated modeling framework. But more importantly, the most tricky part was how to combine this with the knowledge and the priorities and the expertise from the different countries and from the different stakeholders. So in order to do this, we divided the entire process in what we call a 3-step or 4-step almost approach. Very first approach, of course, is to understand where are we working. Many of us, we were coming from Europe, so we were European scientists, and you need to start building, if you want to build trust, you need to start by trying to understand really from the very, very local perspective, what are the issues. So, and again, as I was saying before, you have different people with more technical expertise, less. I mean, in this case was relatively high because we were talking to ministry level, so more or less that they are people that, that they are used to work with technical information. But in any case, we had to kind of find a process to discuss something so complex as the Nexus, so involving the 3 sectors, water, food, energy, and at the same time trying to bring the knowledge from all these 8 countries, no? So for that, we developed some what we call participatory system mapping tools. I'm not going to go into the details, but I think this speaks for the kind of a bit of innovative kind of tools in which you can engage with the stakeholders to try to get their understanding in relatively user-friendly terms of what are the issues. So sorry, okay, well, this is just one picture of one of the meetings that we have, where we had these round tables and we had all these different cards, and these different cards were representing either resources or pressures or future infrastructure or current infrastructure, etc. No? So there was this dialogue between different sectors and different countries, trying to understand, what others are seeing and what others want, because this is one thing which is very obvious for any of us to say, okay, it's necessary to understand what other sectors are doing to analyze the implications in mind. But in these government settings, there is sometimes rarely the opportunity to have this exchange. So once we did this, and of course this was a much more complicated process, but I just want to summarize a bit, give you a taste of what this process was. This is where the more qualitative part and these tools was integrated with the modeling part. So we were trying to develop scenarios, participatory scenarios, trying to develop business as usual kind of a scenario. So what if nothing happens? What is expected to happen for the different sectors? How is water going to be affected by the different development plans? Who are the winners? Who are the losers, etc. And for that, of course, we continue developing the narratives using this system mapping exercise. I mean, this is just a infographics about what was the spirit, behind doing this exercise. And then, of course, this was all modeled as well, no? So that there was some quantitative information in the back. So we did that for business as usual, and we use that as a reference to try to develop what we call a sustainability vision. No, once realizing the implications of where are we ended up, where are we likely going to end up, we started working on where is actually where we want to be, or they in this case the stakeholders wanted to be. So the key benefits of the approach, and this is in the words of the SMBC Watercourse Commission, which for us was very interesting because, I mean, we were coming in there, to try to bring our scientific knowledge, but we had a lot to learn about what is actually driving decision-making in practice, and how can these organizations, SAMCOM, actually facilitate this dialogue across countries. Something that they said that was I think is very useful is that there was a very high participation, and that means a lot of interest from the different perspectives and the different sectors and countries to actually exchange on what issues do they face and what priorities do they have. It was also acknowledged that this kind of approaches actually allow for exchange of, a lot of information in relatively short periods of time. And also what is, I think, the most important part of it, it allows participants to develop and agree on a sense of direction. Then, I mean, this is just the planning phase. Then it comes the implementation, and that's a different story. But actually reaching this level where stakeholders actually start understanding what the others want and try to build something together, which allows them, of course, there's going to be winners and losers, but allow them to understand that there is a possible pathway. I mean, giving up something, but maybe getting something in exchange. We thought it was, I mean, not we, but I mean, it was, in their own words, quite useful. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a snapshot of a total different scale of project. This is very local, because I think it is interesting, and you might have this question, at what level, you can apply this kind of transdisciplinary projects. Well, indeed, actually, we are testing. Of course, you need to suit the tools and the processes to the type of actors that you need to engage with. But we were also working in a very different scale, also in Africa, but we were working here on a very local level. This was a Belmont Forum project. So again, a funding scheme that actually very much supports this kind of transdisciplinary science. So the purpose of this project was to localize the SDG agenda in Africa, no? And the assumption is, of course, I mean, SDGs, we all acknowledge how important that is, but the truth is that once you go beyond the national level and you start going to the subnational level, especially in some parts of the world, although I will not think that in Europe everyone knows what the SDG, I mean, every citizen knows what the SDGs are, but maybe there is higher chances in some other parts of the world, I mean, the SDG agenda is disconnected at the very local level from the realities that people think, and even the way, they're addressing their issues. So we wanted somehow to address and innovate a little bit on how could we use some of our tools to raise awareness about the SDG and link this to their local problems. Another important aspect, because this is a 2-year project, and I mean, I think we need to be realistic. You cannot drive such a change in 2-year project. That's impossible, and that was not the mission of this project. Actually, it was more about building the network to support some collaborative action, to advance in the implementation of the local sustainability agenda, and some sort of institutionalization of this local network, so that once our project is gone, this community of practice or these living labs that we were using, somehow they can organize themselves and they can maybe get funding from another project or from other institutions in order to continue their work. So we did, well, I'm not going to enter here too much into details. We developed a number of tools. These were mostly participatory tools. We were not using models or anything like this. This was mostly, we did the simulation serious games, as it is a few serious games. And then we try to also innovate as well from a scientific point of view. We were a team of different partners and everyone had experience in co-production methods. So what we actually try to bring is the best of these different methods to create what we call a framework that actually allows you to use different tools depending on the type of processes that you want to set up. But I will skip the rest because I want to show you, well, this is one of the areas where we were working. Fimela, this is a district located in Senegal. They face, I mean, poverty is number one issue, and because of that, they struggle with many other aspects related to low access to wash, big problems of soil salinization, deforestation, limited educational and job opportunities. I mean, many challenges which are strictly connected to SDGs. So the work that we were trying to do there to localize the SDG agenda, I mean, our target group of stakeholders were basically local municipalities, grassroots organizations, tourism sector, because there is a very nice protected areas around there. So there is a business opportunity there, farmer associations, etc. No, but it was a very local activity. So, well, this is the innovation that I was speaking about. In terms, we designed it, we were combining the best of our different approaches from the different institutions, and we designed a process which was a 6-step process, a co-production process, which was supported by different kind of tools. But I would like to show you a video that speaks about what we did there from the perspective of the local stakeholders. So I hope, cross my fingers, that this works. And if not, if you cannot hear it or something, please, Serena or Sineb or someone, let me know.
So the main idea of this tool was to say, well, let's focus on one issue on the whole territory, and let's try to show how we must have coordination in order to solve the issues.
En tant qu'universitaire, donc on est habitué globalement à cette phase théorique, hein. Donc la descente sur le terrain déjà, d'affronter la réalité et d'écouter les acteurs territoriaux. Ça nous permet d'avoir accès à des informations vraies et tout à fait concrètes. Hein. Donc, je disais qu'on devrait même prendre ces jeux-là, bien ce style en tout cas de réflexion, on devrait pouvoir amener ça même au sein des universités et puis voir un peu comment on peut améliorer le système d'enseignement au niveau des universités. Parce que l'information entre facilement. On sait qu'à travers le jeu, les acteurs arrivent à comprendre rapidement la réalité sur le terrain. Mais là, quand on met les gens dans le jeu, donc l'information passe rapidement et on a remarqué qu'effectivement, il y a des échanges beaucoup plus, comment dirais-je, riches. Voilà. Et aussi, le jeu nous a incité aussi à prendre des décisions, c'est-à-dire si on voit qu'effectivement on perd de l'espace vert pour faire de l'agriculture, il fallait peut-être penser à investir sur comment dire, des activités de reboisement, hein, un petit peu améliorer la situation des choses. Et on sait qu'au cours des années, en fonction des financements que l'agriculteur, faisait, ça pouvait améliorer, par exemple, ses possibilités d'investissement.
Les réflexions qui ont été faites ce matin, si on profite des conclusions, et si les maires ou bien les représentants de leur communauté s'en approprient et les appliquent, on va voir un film là qui va présenter un visage beaucoup plus intéressant, beaucoup plus développé.
What I have realized during this workshop is that these tools were able to be used by experts, but also by communities. And we had the proof here in Finland that this was really possible. And I am a good witness for that.
Okay. So, yeah, this is, as I was saying, this is a total different scale, but basically it comes back to the same. I mean, how can we, with our scientific capacities and our, our capacities to innovate, of making science more accessible and actually making tools as well that allowed us to get also the understanding from other type of knowledge, which is also so important. Oops, okay, sorry. Okay, so now I'm going to change. This is the third and last example, and now we are going to go back to Europe. This is actually the context in which I met many of the UNUFlores colleagues that invited me also to this webinar. And what I would like to share is some experiences from the work that we are doing within the NEXUSNET, which is a cost action supported by the European Commission, and it's dealing with the Nexus. It's called Network on Water, Energy, Food Nexus for Low Carbon Economy in Europe and beyond. For those of you who are not familiar with the cost action, what does it mean or what does it entail? It is an international network. I mean, these kind of projects are intended to support the development of international networks of researchers, but not only researchers, also other actors, practitioners and policymakers. And in this case, the core topic of creating such a network is to understand and see and explore how the water, food, energy nexus can be better adopted or can foster policy coherence and support the transition towards a circular and low carbon economy. So there is many different working groups. I've been leading the working group 3, which was on policy measures. And connected to the topic that I was presenting on, or the issue of transdisciplinary science, we decided, or we agreed in our working group, that it would be, other than mapping what is the state of the art and what is the knowledge that we have in terms of nexus across Europe, to also understand what are the policy recommendations that all this research is being leading to. I mean, what type of policy recommendations, and importantly as well, we took the opportunity to understand what is the level of co-production of these policy recommendations and the science behind these Nexus projects also. So to see to what extent, you know, we are really trying to do these kind of projects in a more collaborative manner. So these were the main research questions that we had. This is a joint effort of many people. I mean, this is not me. There is a lot of partners from the NEXUSNET, which I invite you to have a look at in case you are actually interested in joining the network, because you are very welcome to join the network and become members of different working groups. But well, as a result of the joint effort that we had within Working Group 3 and in collaboration with the other working groups and also Working Group 6 with Serena, we mapped during the last decade, so between 2013 and end of 2022, more than 99 projects funded with European schemes, from FP7, the last FP7s, H2020, Horizon Europe, GPI Urban Europe, Prima, Cost, and Interreg, no? And out of this, we also did a mapping of how many case studies each of these projects were delivering and where were they located. So we identify more than, the majority of the cases located in Southern Europe and the Mediterranean, then followed by Western Europe. So what I'm going to be presenting right now speaks for the further analysis that we did in Southern Europe. So basically speaks also for the region within Europe where there is more research on Nexus being done until now, at least with these funding schemes. So we did a survey, and this survey was sent to the PIs and the stakeholder engagement responsibles within these projects. It was sent to them, and what we wanted to understand, as I said, was to first identify what were the most important challenges, but what is pertinent for what we are discussing here today, as to what extent this Nexus research that is being generated is actually influencing policy and practice. So the results that I will be presenting out of the 124 case studies and then surveys that we sent out, we are going to present the results based on the 43 responses. So it's basically a 35 response rate. Just to be clear, because you might be wondering how is it possible, I mean, some of the results. So this is based. So in terms of where across Europe, Southern Europe and the Mediterranean, most of this research has been done. So you can see that there is a whole diversity, and this is good. That means that there is many countries where there is Nexus research projects being done. It is true that the majority still focus on Southern Europe and to a lesser extent 33% in the Mediterranean, but I think that also has to do with the funding possibilities. No, I mean, PRIMA is probably one of the few funding schemes that also, well, not the only, I mean, Horizon as well, but I mean, I think that this disparity is also motivated by the funding schemes themselves, no, the restrictions that they have in terms of who is eligible and so on. But also interesting, the countries that had most of the Nexus case studies and therefore biggest effort in investigating Nexus research at subnational level is basically Spain and Greece. Okay, so in terms of the challenges that we identify, I mean, we did this bilaterally, in the sense, I mean, they're all combined, but we were trying to look what were the most important challenges and whether there was a pattern across Europe. So you can see that water, I mean, this is not a surprise for anyone working in the water community, but water is at the core, you know, of all the Nexus challenges. And I think there is only a few case studies where water was not a core sector when exploring the Nexus. Water for food. And this expresses the direction of the arrow. So you see from water to food, an arrow that goes into that direction, and then 25 case studies. So that means water dependencies of the food sector. I think it is very interesting as well to see the increase in the interdependencies between water and energy. And I don't think this is a surprise for most of you if you work in this space, and going in both directions, water for energy and energy for water. So diving a bit into the issues, so what are the underneath water-related challenges when we speak about these water energy, water food, or water ecosystem challenges? In the majority of the cases, and it's correlated as well to the physical and socioeconomic activities in Southern Europe and Northern Africa, I mean, it's really a lot on quantity type of challenges, too little water, competition between users, too much variability, but there is also increasingly problems of quality, related to water pollution, salinity, etc. When we do the same kind of analysis from the energy side, the most important challenges are related to cost, and I think this is this is something which is new, making the news these days, the cost of energy, and then as well the increasing energy demand. Energy demand increases for multiple reasons, either because we need to bring water from further distances, further away, we need to pump deeper, because there is more energy required to grow and to transport the food that we need, etc., etc. So there is a whole range of nitty-gritties underneath that, but the increasing energy costs and energy demand is the two most important energy-related challenges in this Nexus. When it comes to land related, I mean, they are agricultural related, but not only, largely related to the intensification of agricultural land and the expansion of agricultural land. But there is, of course, other issues related to land use changes, like the loss of valuable habitats and ecosystems, and also urbanization trends, which are important challenges. Okay, so this is also something which I think maybe it's interesting to discuss. So when you think about the drivers of these problems, large part of the efforts in the Nexus communities, and probably driven because many of the people that have been long working on the Nexus are either engineers or modelers and so on. There has been a strong push for promoting technologies, acknowledging that maybe some of the important things is that we need to become more efficient, etc., which is of course the case. But I think these kind of results are also underpinning something which for us as scientists, it's also important, that we need to be looking much more into the social dimension of the Nexus, because the governance and the socioeconomic aspects actually, together with the cultural aspects, make the big chunk of what are the drivers of this problem. And for me, the lesson learned here is that when we embark ourselves in all this Nexus research, other than having to integrate social scientists into our work, what I think it is very important is that we need to have a very good understanding about what is this socioeconomic, cultural context and governance context. So that requires immediately that we need to involve stakeholders as well in the problem framing, in identifying what is actually the constraints in this space. Okay, well, maybe this is a bit too detailed, but for those of you that maybe are more on the governance side or are interested in the governance side, we also try to analyze a bit what are the underpinning drivers, specific governance drivers. No, I mean, what are the aspects that underneath all these challenges that we are facing. So financing, it is a very important one. And this makes total sense, because if you look at and if you read the literature, in Europe in particular, we are not short on regulations, or, I mean, we could do better on institutions, definitely, and there is a lot of room for improving the cooperation on institutions. But an important challenge as well is, how do we implement all these programs and plans? Because our policies are very ambitious, and it's great that they are very ambitious, but we need sustainable financing for this. And this came out as one of the most important driver underpinning some of these issues, no? That from a governance side. The cooperation and participation, I think this is coming more recurrently in most of the research that we have probably seen, as well as, related also with the planning and management. There is room for revising and aligning the regulatory frameworks, and of course institutional capacities, and very important, and this is also an important emerging field, is the political economy dimension. Okay, allow me, because I would like to allow for some time to speak. So this goes a bit into the details of the policy options that we have identified, or the projects, sorry, have identified in terms of what is needed in terms of infrastructure and technology. I will quickly mention that promotion and development of renewable energies is seen as a very important option to actually alleviate part of this energy cost and cope with the increasing energy demands that we have seen. And very importantly as well, is demand management approaches, and especially this applies for the water cycle when it comes to upgrading water infrastructure and irrigation. It's not only always about making more water available, it's actually managing better the water that we have, and this also includes the digitalization. From the governance side, the financial instruments. And here, it's not just only, okay, subsidies, it is mentioned that there are subsidies. Not everything can be done through subsidies. I think that we also need to generate the right incentives, because there is many incentives still for many very powerful actors not to do what we are supposed to be doing. So this is a field of area where I think a lot of research could also go. What kind of incentives could support a better enabling environment? And of course, other aspects relate to modifications and alignment with the regulatory framework and promoting the vertical and horizontal cooperation across institutions from the same sector and across sectors. Capacity development, and I think this speaks as well for how do we bring Nexus to society. I mean, I bet that anyone here trying to explain around you what is the Nexus to your neighbors or your partners or whatever, people, they freak out. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about, when this matters to everyone. But I think that there needs to be a better effort in doing this knowledge transfer. What does it mean for society that we are not adopting this integrated approach and awareness rising? Okay, I'm finalizing. I think this is my last slide, or almost the last one. I think I have one more. And this speaks for the level of co-production. I was saying at the beginning when I was explaining this purpose of this project is that we wanted to know what is actually emerging in terms of policy recommendations, but we also wanted to know to what extent these projects are being co-produced with the relevant stakeholders, those that actually suffer the consequences of the nexus, or those that are actually in charge of making the decisions to address these problems. And I mean, from the total number of aspects that, the case studies that we have been looking, we have 2 axes there. You can see the Y is the co-production and the X is the implementation. So it's good to see that there is somehow, even if the number of projects still small, it's good to see that actually the biggest bunch of the case studies that we have mapped are on that axis of there is level of co-production, medium to high, versus an implementation. Definitely, if we come into the transdisciplinary, coming back to the issue of transdisciplinary science, this is where we should, for those wanting to work in this space, this is where we should aim. Also because higher level of co-production somehow I think also guarantees a higher level of implementation, because it's also higher acceptance and feasibility of the solutions that have been proposed. So key messages that I want to highlight from this work is that governance is a chief driver of Nexus challenges. And I think that we can take note for the design of our future Nexus projects. There is a range of recommendations and areas for further work that have been proposed along these different axes of infrastructure, technology, awareness. And I think this is maybe also something that, I mean, at least some of us, we would like to pick it up. And of course, it is important to understand, and this is one thing that is clear to us. I mean, the Nexus research has really taken off in the past decade, so to say. So any kind of science that from going from the science to the implementation, there is always a time lag. So we cannot pretend that every project that we are developing right now is going to be implemented tomorrow. But the fact that there is some co-production actually probably gives a bit more signs of, success. And I think, I think that's it. I don't know, I think I've been speaking maybe close to 55 minutes, but I hope this finally leave us some time for Q&A. Yep, I don't know, Serena, or who is going to moderate.
Thank you, Bárbara, and thank you also for driving us around the world with the Nexus. I think this was very interesting. And if said, then I will leave the floor to any questions, and if not, perhaps I would start with one. Then I would start with that. Bárbara, I was interested also in looking at your work you have been doing in Senegal, and you said that you were going there to bring knowledge, but then you said that we had to learn a lot. So what was the perspective from a trainer, that this mutual understanding where we could improve our knowledge transfer, or what could be the steps actually to include more Nexus in also transdisciplinary work?
Thank you, Serena. I think this is a very good question. So if I speak very frankly, so we had this project that was using all this jargon, localizing the SDG agenda. Once you land in these places, in these parts of the world, and you see with your eyes what is the local realities, and me being a white woman coming there, I just didn't feel I could come into a room and say, let me speak about the SDGs. I mean, not as a start, no? I felt that I had to have a total different entry point to be able to do something minimal relevant, no? So it is something very simple. We don't have all the answers. Science hasn't got all the answers. And I think the very first thing that actually worked for us, we need to listen. We need to spend a lot of time listening first. And this is not easy, and not just because you have more or better skills or worse skills to listen. It's not about that. It's also sometimes because projects are time bound. And to build this trust, and when we go specifically, when we say that we want to build networks and that these are institutionalized, to be very realistic, this is a very long-term project. So for me, the learning is that if we really want to be realistic with, you know, doing science that it's meaningful and impactful, we need to have the time and the resources to do that. And especially the time is not so much about the money. Sometimes it's about the time that you need to build this and to have and to really develop these listening skills. And brings me to another topic, because I've been reflecting just by struggling with many of these things. We need to improve, I mean, practical things that we can do. We need to improve our curriculums, because we need to, as scientists, I mean, we have been very much trained in disciplinary settings. So we are great modelers, we are great economists, we are great whatever, ecologists, but we need not these more kind of transversal skills. Communication skills and many other skills. And this is not easy, because that goes back to, you know, the way we have been educated and the way we have been trained. So practical experience from going on the ground, active listening, the very first step, not coming in saying, I want to do this and I'm here to help you. Is like, let's listen first to what are your issues, you know, and how can we do a joint problem framing. I think that will be the most successful way. And for that, of course, we need skills and we need time. That's what I can say.
Thank you. And perhaps then I take up from there, also related to the when we were speaking, I mean, you were speaking about the Nexus and how was the reaction from them, and to say, okay, not by the name, but this understanding of synergies and trade-offs was then like initially, you know, well accepted, or you had to work on towards that? Because most of the time what we see, this silos understanding is rather strong also in those regions.
Yes. So energy sector, in particular, they seem to feel that they are way more, because they're more powerful. They don't seem to buy in so quickly into why do we need the Nexus. I mean, I don't want to generalize, no, but I'm just speaking, if I compare the sectors, water, people in the water sector, they immediately understand the Nexus, because you know, water goes for everyone, so there is huge implications always. Agriculture, I think increasingly, there has been always this link with water, but I think they're increasingly realizing this with the energy side. So I would say if we start this dialogue with the different sectors, probably the ones, and without generalizing, my experience, the ones that come later into understanding why do we need this integrated approach are the energy people. And when you translate these two countries, and especially transboundary basins, upstream don't really matter so much, because at the end they will only suffer the consequences of their own actions. No, so it is a bit in the Zambezi, for the people of Mozambique, it was absolutely clear that building a dam, you know, upstream or developing, I don't remember the figures, but there was massive irrigation development plans was going to affect, you know, the flow of water. But yeah, I mean, the people from Angola upstream, they will not really, you know, so there is a bit this, depending where you are and depending how basically, maybe it comes down to the issue of who is the most, I mean, if you are the one that has more power, you are probably not less aware, but maybe less worried.
Willingness to
because you don't depend so much on others. You depend on yourself, basically. Not exactly, but you know what I mean. No, it's a power asymmetry, so to say.
Thank you. That said, I move then to the Q&A also from our participants. I have a question. Thank you, Barbara. First of all, how can we keep stakeholders engaged on the long run? It happened that the site start of a project with a high level of motivation decrease over time. Can you further elaborate?
Yeah, well, this is, I don't have the, unfortunately, I don't have the magic answer, but I do feel from experience, and not just my own experience, just talking also with people that have been involved, that there is a number good practices and lessons learned that we know that we need to learn as well when we are scientists embarking ourselves in this stakeholder engagement process. So for a very practical kind of thing. So first of all, I mean, when we engage the stakeholders, we are engaging them into our project where we have our goals. And there needs to be something there for them. So they can attend 1-day meeting or 2 days meeting to share information for fitting your project goals. But we need to make sure, and this is the truth, the root of co-production, there needs to be there something for them. So you are designing a process to fulfill your research objectives. And if you don't have the flexibility to co-design the questions so that whatever you are addressing, it is also something, you know, that your stakeholders need to have answers for, at least you need to find the incentives for that. So that's one from the start. It has been spoken a lot about this stakeholder fatigue. I think it is very important to understand that it's not only when you go and try to speak to a water authority. I don't know, I have the example of I'm involved in a Nexus project, and this, our main stakeholder, it's actually also the main stakeholder of 2 other projects which are funded within the same co. So we cannot, honestly, we cannot be calling these people once every 6 months for all of these meetings to join our meetings. So what we had to do was to actually coordinate among projects and say, okay, maybe we cannot do the super ambitious workshop that we wanted to do, or maybe we need to find a way to coordinate, but it cannot be seen that everyone here comes with their own, with its own thing. So I think this is also something very important that needs to be taken into account when you do a stakeholder engagement, because I don't want to put my shoes in, I don't want to put myself in the shoes of, I don't know, decision making from any sector. I don't mind. They're getting calls every day because now it's a request, you know, to have a stakeholder engagement in their project. And third, but not less important, is that I am a natural scientist. Okay, so I'm not trained as a social scientist. But before I started running myself any stakeholder engagement process, I went through a lot of mentoring. And I think it's very important that we don't, in the same way that a social scientist will not start doing a model because he or she will understand, you know, that needs to get trained in the use of models and how to do this. I think the same thing for stakeholder engagement is not anyone that can jump into a meeting and facilitate it. I mean, it needs to be, other than carefully planned. I mean, the person or the persons that are facilitating this, they need to know what they're doing. So this also ensures the trust and engagement of the stakeholders. And many natural scientists went into that avenue, and that's fine. But you just don't jump because you like it. You jump, but you get trained first.
Thank you for this explanation, and I hope that our participants are also happy with, but please free to further give feedback. Now we have one more question that comes from our director. So thank you, Barbara. First of all, I have a question on the meta level. There are no incentives. There are even opportunity costs for transdisciplinary research. What would you change as a Minister of Research?
I would change the, I would change the system of incentives. I mean, in the sense that, okay, I mean, I know that this is quite complex. That is not as simple as saying, you change the system of incentives, and the way you are evaluated as a scientist, is not just based on your academic performance, but actually you are evaluated by other aspects. But the truth is that I think that we need changes. I mean, I don't know, and please, I mean, I really like this question, and probably also I don't have like the perfect answers, but my thinking, from reflecting from experience and seeing how difficult this is in practice, is that first, as scientists, we don't have the incentives to go into this because it takes too much time. Yes, someone. It was Samanti. I don't know. Were you trying to say something or? Okay. So in my performance evaluation, the social impact of my work 3 years ago did not count. So it really did not count. Now it's counting, but it's only counting a little bit. But okay, this is a small change. I think as well, you need to have the right institutional setup, and that goes back to what I was saying. We are trained, even the way we are organized, maybe UNU Flores and maybe my institute, IIASA, they're a bit different because we are not disciplines. I mean, we are interdisciplinary, you know, as the setup of the institutions, but also this requires different ways of arranging the way, you know, the scientific community is organized. And I had a third point, but I don't know if I remember now. I had the third. Oh yeah, the skills. What I was saying, the curriculum. I think this is also very important. So yes, there is a lot of transaction costs right now. Yeah, I mean, I think the issue that we are facing is that, and especially these days, you know, with the difficulty of making this differentiation between, you know, what are facts between what is, you know, so the role of science, so to say, you know, and the credibility of science. Either we do a big effort in trying to do a science which is closer to society, and this is very controversial sometimes when I say that, but more demand driven, or yeah, we are likely to fail. So I will say that there is a few institutional changes that need to happen with, of course, a lot of complexity. I'm not denying that.
Thank you, Barbara. We have 2 more questions. I hope you're fine with it.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So that comes also from other colleagues. So besides listening skills, what communication procedure or channel should we use or to be effective, since scientists and policymakers might have different levels of knowledge, language, resulting in misunderstanding? I think this was also partially answered, but I think
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah. So I had this discussion in other occasions, and someone was saying, yeah, but I mean, I'm a scientist, I'm not a journalist, so, you know, I do not necessarily know exactly, you know, how to communicate things, and there is, as you said, the different target audiences and so on. So I think we can all, I mean, and some people have naturally more ability to communicate than others. Maybe the very first step is just to realize that people will not buy in when we show graphs or scientific papers. This is really something that is not going to pass the message. And if you can get some training, but importantly, I mean, I think that we need to have a strong communication teams in our, what I want to say here is that it's not only our individual responsibility of scientists, is that there is a very strong need as well to invest in communications at the organization level. And sometimes the departments are really tiny, and I know this from experience, and these people are overstretched, but it's very important because we have to publish the papers, but it's equally important, I think, for our own institutions as well, to make that science, you know, known to the wider group. So I think we can get some more training, and I think we will all benefit as scientists to get, you know, basic kind of training. So how do you have to communicate with different audiences, in which way, but of course without taking you out of your comfort zone. Once you get out of your comfort zone, you need to be supported by specialists. So not everyone needs to be an Instagrammer, not everyone needs to be there. We are different, we have a different role. So yeah, that's what I can think of.
Thank you. So infrastructure and facilitation on communication. Thank you. So there is a last question. And what are the next steps in the pathways to sustainability project? Are there initiatives to implement the results in the local policy measures? So what's the next step after the Nexus projects?
You mean, sorry, just to get clarification, you mean on any of the examples I provided, or
yes,
the last
how
example?
to move into implementation, actually into policy measures, actually sustainability projects. So I think referring mostly to research onto implementation.
Mm-hmm. So for this, I mean, for this specific, I mean, if I think now loud about these projects that I've been working, I mean, in the project that we work in Senegal, basically there is a lot more to do in terms of research or co-production, if you want to say. So the step 2 after this, they are not yet at the step of implementation, because actually this project also, the main objective has been to lift capacity. So with these games that we have developed, so that they are trained themselves and that they can, you know, increase their awareness and train others in their communities about what are the implications of these local decisions. But to bring that into policy, that requires another level of probably research as well, because we also need to provide more evidence base. So some of these projects, I see that they are seed grants that will require further research, and I know I said in the presentation that we scientists, we always say we need more time when we need more funding to do research. But the truth is that some projects actually need more research to really provide something meaningful to really provide something meaningful for policy. If I think about the NEXUSNET, I mean, the last example that I provided, I think this kind of analysis needs to reach, and I think this is also, among other things, part of the NEXUSNET agenda. This needs to go to the European Parliament. I mean, it should be noted what are the implications, I mean, what are the recommendations that are seen, maybe with not an aggregated presentation like the one I did, but even picking up on certain topics where we are really seeing gaps between policy alignment and so on. I mean, this just needs to be brought into the right policy arena. And the difficult part for us as scientists is actually get there, because we need the channel to get there, not just the communication skills, which are also very much needed, but the access to get there. So it is basically the step of how do you bring this to the right table to make some decisions, and of course communicate it appropriately and so on. So it depends. I think that a transdisciplinary project doesn't end directly into implementation. Sometimes it leads to further research, and sometimes, as this last case, we are not developing new research. We are just informing about what is the status and what is the recommendations that are being provided, and just to raise the question, who is going to pick up, and what should be done.
And perhaps this then well connects also to the question of our director, is what would you change? Because I think implementation projects are again not very open to funding opportunities, or at least there is a minority of fund availability on that. And perhaps this could be also why we do communicate directly with the policy makers in order to influence actually potentially also the change of modules or way how projects should be also further seen.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and the research, sorry, I just wanted to say here, the research funding scheme also, the landscape, the research funding also needs to change slightly. It needs to be more open to, so when you put a proposal for Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe now, you need to basically anticipate what are going to be the results of the project. And barely you have the time to actually do any kind of co-design, of what is actually that we are doing. So you are guessing, sometimes with some small consultations and so on, but you are basically guessing what your stakeholders want. So it is difficult that when you finish the project that this can go directly into implementation. But I think it is a hybrid thing between maybe allowing research funding to do a bit more flexible transdisciplinary approach, or even where co-framing, you know, of the problem is done as part of the project with, you know, of course, some, yeah, I mean, not a blank sheet, you know, and say, give me the money and then I will tell you what I will be doing. But I think there is some flexibility, and I think there should be, or maybe we should be also exploring better what kind of funds are there for implementation, because I mean, UN, I mean, you are in the UN system. When we work for the World Bank or some of the UN organizations, they are working directly on implementation, and they are eager to have science that supports actually some of these.
Absolutely.
But we are not, I mean, the problem is that many of us as scientists, we are not necessarily in that ecosystem, you know, we stay in our academia, and then consultants, you know, are bringing some of the knowledge. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we as scientists need to get more involved in these kind of projects as well. Thinking loud.
Very good conclusion, I would say, also of our Nexus seminar. And with that, Barbara, really thank you for your time and sharing with us your insight about your project. I think we have learned a lot. Presentation, just for the audience, we will upload on YouTube the presentation, so you can get actually further or re-listening actually to Barbara's presentation. And of course, any of you is free to reach out to Barbara bilaterally.
Sure.
That's
I will be very pleased also to engage, and I mean, please feel free to reach out. I'm sure you also have many experiences, and I also want to learn from others. So
absolutely, likewise. That said, with that, we can close the Nexus seminar. Thanking you, Barbara, and perhaps Zineb, if you allow me, just share the next presenter or presentation. This will be from our sister institute, UNU Chris, from Nidhi Nagabatla, and she will be speaking on January 15, 2024. So see you in the next year, so in 2024, about navigating water security by unveiling the gender nexus perspective. So again, a nexus from a different perspective from gender. Thank you, everyone. Then that said, and thank you again, Barbara, to all of you, a good break for this winter holidays, because we will see each other in the 2024. From my side and from Samanthi Silva, we wish you a lovely week ahead and also festive holidays. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.